Hi guys, this is the last 2 pages in the packet. I'm gonna go over these, then I'm gonna send you a review sheet that you can complete on your own to just make sure you're doing okay. It's important that you follow the instructions on these because different questions are just, verifying that you understand each different method, okay? If you're confused about simplest radical form, that's page 25. Okay, so I'm being told to use completing this square. So that's the method I'm going to use. But remember, you can check all of these by substitution, or you could solve it another way and just make sure that you understand what you're doing. So x squared minus 2x plus something is going to equal 12 plus something. So my objective is to make that a perfect square trinomial. So I take half of -2, which is -1. And then I square it, and I add it to both sides. Okay, now I take the square root of both sides, and that gives me x minus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 13. The opposite of subtracting 1 is adding 1, so I add 1 to both sides, and I get 1 plus or minus the square root of 13. And that's already in simplest radical form, so I'm done. Okay, so this has a 3. I would really like to get rid of that if I can, and I can, so that's going to be my method. So I get x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. I'm going to move the 8 to the other side. And I'm looking to make that a perfect square trinomial. So half of 2 is 1. So I know that this is going to be an x plus 1 squared. And then 1 times 1 is 1, so I add 1 to both sides, and that gives me 9. This means I'm going to get a rational answer because the square root of 9 is 3. So I get x plus 1 equals plus or minus 3. Subtract 1 from both sides, that gives me x is equal to -1 plus or minus 3. This I can calculate. When you can calculate, you really should. So I have -1 plus 3, which is 2, and then I have -1 minus 3, which is -4. So what that basically tells me is I could have factored that if the instructions were different. Okay, so I really don't like that half, so I'm going to get rid of it by multiplying by 2. Remember that fractions, if you multiply by the lowest common denominator, you can make them into whole numbers or integers. Okay, so let me just double check. 2 times a half, 6. Okay, good. All right, so r squared minus 12r plus blank equals 4 plus blank. Half of -12 is -6. -6 squared is 36. So that gives me 40. You take the square root of both sides, and that's going to give me r minus 6 equals plus or minus radical 40. Okay, so r is equal to 6 plus or minus radical 40. A radical 40 can be simplified by using the square root of 4 and the square root of 10, which gives me 2 radical 10. So my final answer, making a little box up here, is r is equal to 6 plus or minus 2 radical 10. Okay. So the next one. Oh, it's not going to be pretty, but that's what a calculator's for. If you get answers that are kind of like icky or a lot of work, you're more than welcome to use a calculator. So y squared plus 1.5 minus 2.5 equals 2. Okay, there should be an x right there. All right, so I got y squared plus 1.5x plus I don't know equals 4.5 plus I don't know. Okay, so half of 1.5, like half of $1.50 is 75 cents. 75 cents squared is 225. Right? Is that right? 2.25? No, that's not right. That is not right. Let me erase that. I don't know what I entered in my calculator there. Well, I do know it, but okay. 0.75 squared is 0.56. That only makes sense that it would be smaller because 3/4 of 3/4 is 9/16, but I'm using decimals. Okay, so that equals 5.0625. Okay, so take the square root of both sides. I get y plus 0.75 equals plus or minus, believe it or not, oh, that's why I was looking ahead on the calculator. That's 2.25. Now I figured out what I did wrong before. Okay, so y is equal to negative 0.75 plus or minus 2.25. So y is equal to negative 3 or y is equal to 1.5, which does mean that could have been factored if the direction said something different. Okay, I wouldn't stress much over the decimals. You just have to plug through. It is what it is. Don't plan on giving you decimals, but I can't promise what the regents will or won't have. All right, so half of negative 3 is 1.5. That's going in the wrong spot. You can tell I'm getting tired. Stay with me, guys. I'll try to stay with you. All right, minus 1.5, and that would be squared. And 1.5 squared is 2.25. That I know, because I know 15 times 15. So that's 10.25. Okay, so P is equal to 1.5 plus or minus square root of 10.25. All righty, there we go. If you want to look at what that is on your calculator, feel free. I just want to move this along because I don't want to take up too much of your time. All right, so any method. Factors of 4 that will give me a 6 is not going to happen, so I'm going to do completing the square. All right, so half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9, adding 9 to both sides. Okay, so x plus 3 squared is equal to 5, square root, x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus square root of 5. So final answer. X is equal to negative 3 plus or minus square root of 5. Okay, solve using any method. That's factorable, so I am totally factoring. I hear you guys when you say you like to factor more than the other methods. I do too. But we can't always get what we want, so you got to have other ways. Completing the square is kind of cool, though, when we start to talk about like the graphing, because you'll see the vertex. Like when we did absolute values, you saw the vertex in the absolute value equation. Again, you'll see the vertex. So it is kind of cool. All right. I'm going to try to stretch this because I know some of you are still struggling with this splitting the linear term. So 3 times 4 is 12. Ideally you would want to divide by 3, but sometimes you can't. So if you can't, then I would do splitting. So I have 3x squared plus 2x plus 6x plus 4 equals 0. I also noticed that some of you are doing splitting even when there is a coefficient of 1. And hey, that's cool. If you like splitting, split away. Just keep splitting, people. Split. Banana splits. Oh, just made myself hungry. Oy vey. All right, so I got that. Looking good. So I have x plus 2 and 3x plus 2 equals 0. So x is equal to -2, and x is equal to -2 divided by 3, or -2/3. All right, last question. This is something you're going to see pretty soon because we're going to start graphing. Is the graph of a parabola looks like that, but you might have seen it already. And so with this, I know that it's going to look like that because the 16 is negative, which means that it's upside down instead of like right side up. So it looks like an upside down U. And what they're saying is that the ball is released. So it's like thrown. Think of like a softball, like the high pitches in softball. So like the pitcher releases the ball and it kind of goes in an arc. That's what a parabola looks like. I totally forgot that I wasn't videoing myself, and here I am acting it out, but that's not the point. Okay, so what they're looking for is when is it 37 feet? So when does y equal 37? So when does y equal 37? That initial velocity of 48, you don't really need that because they gave you the equation, but it's right here in the equation. That's always the initial velocity. And the -16, that has to do with force of gravity. I'm probably not the best person to explain force of gravity to you because I am not a physics teacher and I'm not 100% how like all of that works. So maybe something you want to Google because, it is kind of cool and it's interesting, but I just happen to know it. I don't really completely understand it, but it's something I remember. I took physics. I was a long time ago. All right. So, ideally I want to get rid of that -16. You want to get rid of that -16 because it's just easier to factor if you don't have it. And I did notice that everything was a multiple of 16, so I can. And I just want to be careful with my signage because wrong signs mess me up. Factorable. I love that it's factorable. Okay, so I got -2 and I got -1. So when I solve those, I get t equals 1 and t equals 2, which means that this is at 1 second and this is at 2 seconds. So the ball is up and down pretty fast. So after how many seconds will the ball be 37 feet above the ground? It'll be there at 1 second and again at 2. All right, so this is it. End of the packet. Never thought we'd have done this packet at home, but hey, it's been fun for me. I hope it's been kind of fun for you. If you have any questions, send them to Zoom. No, just if your parents will know what I meant by that. But if you have any questions, email me and I'll set up a time to Zoom you. Have a great day. Wish your families well from me and my family. Bye.